Life is unfair.
Hey everybody, I'm Critic, and I'm in the mood to cover something nostalgic. That's why today, I'm going to be reviewing an episode from the classic Nickelodeon cartoon SpongeBob SquarePants. It won't just be any episode, however. No, I'll be taking a look at the infamous Season 7 entry One Course Meal in an effort to answer an interesting question I've always had. Just how bad was it?
For those of you who live under a rock, SpongeBob SquarePants is an animated absurdist sitcom about the life of its eponymous main character, an anthropomorphic sea sponge who works as a fry cook at a restaurant called the Krusty Krab. Other prominent characters from the series include Mr. Krabs, a greedy, selfish crab who owns the Krusty Krab, Patrick, an imbecilic pink sea star who's SpongeBob's best friend, Squidward, a dour and cynical octopus who's SpongeBob's only other co-worker at the Krusty Krab, and Plankton, an evil plankton with a knack for science who owns a competing restaurant called the Chum Bucket, which makes him both SpongeBob's and Mr. Krabs' arch nemesis. The series was created by Steven Hillenburg and produced by the television network Nickelodeon, where it premiered in May of 1999. Upon release, SpongeBob SquarePants became the network's biggest hit. There were very many reasons why that was. The show had likable characters whose personalities and temperaments made them easily identifiable, and the underwater city of Bikini Bottom gave the show a unique setting with its own customs, architecture, and lore. The biggest draw that SpongeBob SquarePants had, however, was that it was just fucking funny. The first 3 seasons of the show are often hailed as masterpieces of cartoon comedy, with endless memes and quotable lines spawning from them. The show was also quite versatile with its writing. One episode could be teaching you a lesson about the dangers of succumbing to peer pressure, and the next episode could be telling an empowering story about the show's resident sad sack finally achieving their dreams.
Unfortunately, like all good things, the show's quality couldn't last.
After the production and release of SpongeBob SquarePants' first theatrical movie, Steven Hillenburg stepped down as its showrunner, handing the creative reins of the show over to longtime series writer, director, and storyboarder Paul Tibbitt. And it was sadly under his watch that the show started to lose a lot of what made it enjoyable. The characters became flanderized, the comedy grew stale, and worst of all, the overall writing of the episodes ranged from decent to downright horrible.
So where does One Course Meal rank among the post-movie SpongeBob episodes? Let's find out.
The episode opens up in the office of Mr. Krabs, who's preparing a money bath for himself.
Why he would choose to do this at his restaurant during work hours is anyone's guess, but then again, weirder things have happened on this show.
Right as Mr. Krabs jumps into the bathtub and gets settled in, however, his nose picks up an unusual scent. After wrapping himself in a towel, he bursts into the kitchen and demands to know what SpongeBob is burning there. After SpongeBob sniffs the air himself, he tells Mr. Krabs that the offending odor is from a high-grade explosive. Mr. Krabs freaks out about this, but before he can do anything, we cut to the outside of the restaurant, where we see a scheming Plankton riding a hang glider over it. He lets out a maniacal laugh, and then presses the only button on the remote control he's holding. He then drops said control onto the roof of the Krusty Krab.
Wait a minute. The remote control was the bomb? How in the hell did Plankton manage to carry it with him without accidentally setting it off?
Plankton sails into the restaurant via the hole in the roof left by the bomb, prompting Mr. Krabs to hide behind a broken door and use SpongeBob as a makeshift turret gun. He does this by dumping peas into one of the holes on SpongeBob's head and shooting said peas out of his mouth by cranking one of his arms.
Someone, somewhere, is getting off to the idea of that, And whoever you are, I just want you to know that you're the reason God has abandoned us.
Some of the peas are able to penetrate part of the hang glider's wings, but Plankton blows a bubble that engulfs both himself and his hang glider, shielding him from taking any more damage. Some of the peas that bounce off Plankton hit some of the pots and pans that are hanging on a nearby wall, which causes one of them to fall off and hit SpongeBob on the head, knocking him out of the fight.
Okay, where the hell did that missile come from? It can't have come from the hang glider because there's no way it's carrying something that big with wings that are that tiny. Plankton must have mastered the art of pulling things out of his ass.
Anyway, Mr. Krabs holds SpongeBob up as a human shield against Plankton's missile, but the weapon just implants itself on the floor in front of him. After regaining his composure, Mr. Krabs smugly taunts Plankton about his supposed dud, only for Plankton to press a button and unleash the missile's true nature.
Playing with fire now, Plankton! No need to get worked up over this, Krabs. Just give me the secret formula and I'll be on my way.
Wait, but don't you already know where the secret formula is?
You ain't getting it. I implore you to reconsider. Go jump off a plank!
But Plankton already knows where the secret formula is.
I have ways of getting the information I need. Where's the formula, Krabs?
We've seen Plankton steal the secret formula from Mr. Krabs' safe before. He should already know where it is and how to get it.
Still not gonna talk, eh, Krabs? Okay, Krabs, I see you're not gonna crack.
You know what, fuck it. If the writers aren't gonna give a crap about their show's continuity, then neither will I.
But I don't think your underling is of the same metal.
I'll never talk.
We'll see what Mr. Feather has to say about that.
Okay, but I don't know how to get into the safe behind the painting in Mr. Krabs' office that houses the secret formula. He won't let me near it.
You might be inclined to be angry at SpongeBob for giving this information up so easily, but given what we're about to learn about his job, I'd say his actions here are actually pretty justifiable.
Clever. Behind the painting, eh, Krabs?
How is hiding a safe behind a painting clever? That's like the most common place for people in movies and TV shows to hide their safes. In fact, if I were looking for a safe in somebody's home, that would be the first place I'd look.
Before Plankton can act on this information, he smells something weird in the air and asks his captives what that smell is coming from. SpongeBob tells him that it's blubber, which Plankton freaks out over, and we're about to be shown why. Mr. Krabs' daughter, a giant whale named Pearl, bursts into the kitchen, causing Plankton to beg Mr. Krabs to send her away. Mr. Krabs smugly tells him that he can't control what his daughter does because she's, quote, a big girl, and then warns him that she seems rather hungry.
They're not going where I think they're going with this, are they?
Stay back, Whale! I'm privy to what you do to organisms like me. I've seen those documentaries.
Oh my god, I think they are.
Did he just go into the freezer?
Don't say it!
I prefer salad over Plankton anyway.
Why is it that this is now the second cartoon episode I've reviewed where the characters are portrayed as uncaring cannibals? And how is it that this episode is somehow worse than the other?
For those who don't know what I'm referring to, a while back I did a review of the BoJack Horseman episode Chickens. The plot of that episode revealed that the inhabitants of the BoJack Horseman universe, which include anthropomorphized animals of every species, seem to have no real qualms about eating chickens that are farmed at factories, even though those chickens are on the same level of anthropomorphism as the other species of animals on the show, and thus their killing and consumption should at the very least be disincentivized. For as bad as that episode was, however, at least the writers tried to sidestep the moral implications of adding commercial farms to their universe by explaining that the chickens in those farms are drugged with medicine that stunts their physical and mental development. Now, that's not a great explanation for why everybody is okay with eating these chickens, but it at least is an example of them trying to address the moral implications of their additions to the world of BoJack Horseman. One Course Meal, on the other hand, doesn't do anything to address the fact that Pearl is revealed to be a cannibal. She just casually states that she prefers salad to Plankton, and then the episode moves on as though that line doesn't mean anything. Need I remind you guys that in an earlier episode of this series titled Plankton's Army, Mr. Krabs was able to keep Plankton from stealing the Krabby Patty's secret formula by fooling him into thinking that his own species was the dish's secret ingredient. And when Squidward asked him if Plankton really were the secret ingredient of Krabby Patties, Mr. Krabs said this.
Of course not. And Plankton will probably figure that out and be back again to find out what the real formula is.
So in this world, cannibalism is treated in the same way that it's generally treated here in the real world, and yet none of the other characters bat an eye when Pearl tells them that she's eaten Plankton? I'd say this was a case where the writers of the episode knew nothing about the lore of this show, but that can't be the reason why this bullshit is happening. Because Plankton's voice actor was one of its writers.
Oops.
Anyways, after Plankton runs away in terror, Mr. Krabs laughs about the fact that he's scared of whales and asks Pearl to release him and SpongeBob from the machine. She only agrees to do so if he gives her money, which he reluctantly does. Mr. Krabs then asks her to give Plankton a scare on her way to the mall, but Pearl asks for more shopping money first. He orders SpongeBob to chip in, and SpongeBob agrees. However, when he pulls out a bill and hands it to Pearl, she's distraught to see that it's just play money that has no real value.
Oh, it's all starting to catch up with me.
Not really, considering that SpongeBob is still willing to work for you and keep your trade secrets. Seriously, it's a miracle that you've been able to keep the same two men employed at your restaurant for more than a day.
Mr. Krabs tries to persuade Pearl to scare Plankton by offering to do her homework for her, but she turns him down on the grounds that the chum bucket is gross. After thinking things over for a second, Mr. Krabs then asks to borrow one of her dresses, much to her and SpongeBob's confusion. We then cut to the chum bucket, where Plankton runs over to his computer wife Karen. She greets him by asking how he failed to get the formula this time, and Plankton tells her about Pearl.
Krabs had a whale!
You mean his big, bad, scary teenage daughter?
I hear that mocking tone in your voice, Karen, and I don't appreciate it. Don't you remember what happened to my ancestors at the hands of those beasts?
Okay, when you need a break from your delusional paranoia, the trash needs some attention. It's ripened.
What the fuck is your problem, Karen? Your husband is fearing for his life after running into his natural predator. I know that your marriage isn't exactly a shining beacon of stability or anything, but I would think you'd feel at least a twinge of sympathy here.
After getting unfairly told off by his wife, Plankton goes to the back of his restaurant to do as he was told. After throwing the garbage bag into the dumpster, Pearl jumps out at him and screams that she's hungry. A terrified Plankton then runs back into his restaurant and boards the front doors up with planks of wood before hiding under his... what is that thing called again?
She was next to the transmutator!
Yeah, that. However, Pearl has found a way in and crawls towards Plankton, telling him that she wants plankton meat.
No, that is not a euphemism for his dick. If I see one dirty joke about that line in the comment section of this video, I'm sending you all to the gulag.
Plankton proceeds to hightail it to his wife, and screams at her that Pearl got into the chum bucket. A skeptical Karen asks what he's talking about, and Plankton guides her to the exact spot where Pearl just was. However, Pearl isn't anywhere to be seen.
No whale in here.
I swear, a whale was just in here. She was next to the transmutator. She was right here in this spot. Her mouth all frothy, blowhole blowing.
Oh, that's enough, Plankton. If you'll excuse me, I have to get back to more pertinent binary functions.
Karen! Karen!
I'm not listening!
Wow. Plankton, I think it might be time to give Karen a factory reset, because she is toxic as hell. Why would she think that her husband is lying about this or blowing things out of proportion? Karen's total indignance about Plankton's condition just makes her completely unlikable. Her behavior would have been justified if Plankton actually were making a big deal out of nothing. Like, maybe he just finished watching a documentary about whales and now thinks that they're everywhere even when they're not. Hell, Karen could have offered to watch over Plankton as he sleeps for one night in order to make sure that Pearl isn't breaking into the chum bucket. Then maybe she could come up empty, which would justify why she's being so cold towards Plankton. As is, however, she just comes across as a total bitch.
16 paranoia-filled days later.
Plankton, your dinner's ready. Plankton? Plankton, do you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you bring it up? I can't risk stepping into the light. The whale might see me.
Okay, first of all, if Plankton is so scared of Pearl that he's avoiding going into any and all light because he's afraid she might see him in it, then why is he staying in a room that has a fucking window in it?
Oops.
Second of all, how did he not notice Pearl staring at him through said window or hear the laughter that was coming from her? That glass must be made of some really dense material if it's able to block out all that sound. Third of all, this is the part of the episode where it's revealed that Mr. Krabs is disguising himself as Pearl, and I want you guys to keep in mind how he looks in this scene, because it's going to be important later.
We cut to later that night, where Plankton is undergoing what looks like a brutal nightmare.
By the way, it's nice to see that he shaved all that hair he's grown. Must have been a real pain in the ass to do that in total darkness.
We then get to see his nightmare, where he's being chased down an air vent by Pearl. He runs as fast from her as he can, only to fall right through her blowhole and land in her mouth.
Again, these are not euphemisms for anything sexual. Stop laughing.
Plankton tries to escape, but since there's no way he can break through whale teeth, Pearl eats him. He lands right in Pearl's stomach, where he runs into some of his family members. His grandpa warns him that he's standing in the gastric acid of Pearl's stomach, and Plankton runs onto dry land in order to save himself. Unfortunately, he's too late. The acid has completely eroded the lower half of his body, and now only his skeleton remains. Plankton lets out a blood-curdling scream, Pearl laughs maniacally at his fate, and he wakes up in a cold sweat.
I can't take it. This is driving me crazy.
Hey, so remember what Mr. Krabs' outfit first looked like when he started tormenting Plankton? Because I don't think the animators do.
When Mr. Krabs first started torturing Plankton, he deadass looked exactly like Pearl. And yet in this shot, we can see that Krabs' costume is very rough around the edges. Parts of his arms are showing, there are seams running down the bridge of Pearl's nose, and the halves of Pearl's waist are held together by fucking duct tape. How come we didn't see any of these flaws when Mr. Krabs was first messing with Plankton? It can't have been that we were seeing things from Plankton's perspective and he was just too scared of Pearl to notice how flawed Krabs' costume actually was, because in this shot that focuses exclusively on Mr. Krabs, you know, the one that comes right after Plankton talks about how scared he is to step into any light, we see his costume, and it is immaculate in how well made it is. It can't be that so much time has passed since Mr. Krabs went on this little crusade that the costume is starting to fall apart, because again, the scene I just referenced took place after 2 weeks of Krabs messing with Plankton, and the costume looked just fine. So what's the deal here, guys? If your episode is gonna be poorly written, then can't your visuals at least stay consistent? Anyways, we cut to the next afternoon, where we're treated to an establishing shot of the Krusty Krab. SpongeBob is mopping the floors of the restaurant, but he stops when he hears the sound of Plankton bawling his eyes out. He looks outside and sees Plankton walking out onto the street, where he...
What's the point of going on?
They're not.
I'll just be tortured for the rest of my life by that whale.
They're really not.
That's it, I'm done. The 4:15 bus should be along any time now.
Where do I even begin?
So, I've been avoiding discussing Mr. Krabs' treatment of Plankton for the entirety of this review because I'm not actually bothered by a lot of what Krabs does in this episode. After all, Plankton is the same dude who stole King Neptune's crown, framed Mr. Krabs for it, was alright with Mr. Krabs dying as a consequence of his quote, crime, and enslaved the town of Bikini Bottom with bucket helmets after stealing the secret formula for Krabby Patties and manipulating the Bottomites with them. So he kinda deserves some of this. However, this is where I draw the line. You cannot just show Plankton trying to kill himself in a realistic manner and not only play the situation completely straight, but portray Mr. Krabs as being in the right. It's one thing to have your characters joke about offing themselves, like when Squidward asked if falling from the height that Patrick was holding him from in that one episode where SpongeBob shrunk him with Mermaid Man's belt would kill him. That moment works because we know Squidward is being facetious and isn't actually gonna try to kill himself. Also, the scene is over and done with after a couple seconds. Here though, the writers and animators show us every painstaking step on the way to Plankton trying to commit suicide, and none of it is played for laughs. Forget how irresponsible it is to show such dark subject matter to kids that might not be emotionally mature enough to handle it. Did it never cross the writers' minds just how contrived this whole plot is? First off, in the 7 seasons that this show has been going on for up to this point, you mean to tell me that this is the first time that Mr. Krabs has ever tried to exploit Plankton's fear of whales? Hell, you mean to tell me that Plankton's never even met Pearl before? He's had to have met her before this point because he refers to Pearl as Krabs' daughter before Krabs says anything to him earlier in the episode.
Call off your daughter, Krabs! Call her off!
So clearly Plankton has met her before, and yet Mr. Krabs has never caught on to the fact that Plankton's scared of whales? That is some grade A bullshit right there. Second of all, one of Plankton's biggest traits is his determination. He's shown constantly thinking up and carrying out all sorts of different schemes to infiltrate the Krusty Krab and destroy his nemesis. In fact, Plankton trying to steal the Krabby Patty formula is one of the most overused plots employed by the writers of this show. You expect me to buy that at the sight of a whale, all of that genius and creativity goes out the window and he devolves into a depressed, paranoid coward?
That just makes no fucking sense. I mean, it's just bullshit. Fuck. Oh my.
So yeah, Up until this point, this episode has just been tolerable. Not good, not bad, just tolerable. This moment, however, is where many people felt that this episode crossed the line into being one of the show's worst offerings. And I gotta say, I totally understand why.
Anyways, SpongeBob comes over and asks Plankton why he's laying down in the middle of the road. Plankton informs him that he's intentionally trying to get run over by a bus, and even asks SpongeBob to step on him, which prompts this response.
I'm sorry, Plankton, but that flies in the face of my good nature.
Really now? Would that be the same good nature that led to you getting Squidward kicked out of his secret squid lodge after you invaded his privacy because you just had to find out why he was so happy on certain days? The same good nature that led to you and Patrick breaking into Squidward's house and taking photos with him while he's sleeping? The same good nature that led to you being completely oblivious to all of the pain your lifelong pet was being dealt by your new pet?
I'm sorry, but given everything that we've seen SpongeBob do to others both before and after this point, a line like this drags this episode down a few pegs, and we haven't even discussed the ending yet. But I'm getting ahead of myself.
Plankton shoos SpongeBob away, telling him to enjoy himself while he waits for the next bus. SpongeBob obliges and steps into Mr. Krabs' office, where Krabs is relishing the fact that Plankton will soon be no more thanks to his torment of him. SpongeBob tells Krabs about what Plankton is doing, and unsurprisingly, Mr. Krabs laughs it off.
Mr. Krabs, I know you and Plankton are sworn enemies and all, but putting on a dress to frighten him? Isn't that taking it a little too far?
Keep that line in mind. I will be referring to it later.
Need I remind you of the fact that you disclosed the location of me safe, where I keep the secret formula?
No need to remind me, sir.
Driving someone to suicide by stalking them and exploiting their deepest fears, sure, but giving away the secret ingredient of a fast food menu item? We've gone too far!
After conceding to Mr. Krabs' point, SpongeBob assures him that he can, quote, fix this. We then cut back to Plankton, who's lamenting the fact that a bus hasn't shown up yet.
Man, what does it take to get run over around here?
You'd think he would just cut his losses at this point and head back to the chum bucket so he can kill himself with one of his many dangerous inventions, but I digress.
SpongeBob appears next to him, and we find out that by, quote, fixing the situation, what SpongeBob actually intended to do was help Plankton out, as he tells Plankton where the secret formula is while pretending that he's lying. Plankton rebukes him by reiterating that Pearl has driven him to suicide, only for SpongeBob to reveal two things to him. One, what Mr. Krabs' biggest fear is, and two, that Mr. Krabs has been pretending to be Pearl this whole time. Plankton is understandably pissed off at these revelations, and after SpongeBob goes back to the Krusty Krab, he puts his stubs together and lets out a maniacal laugh. We cut to Krabs' office, where he puts on the last of his outfit while telling SpongeBob how much fun all of this has been for him. Again, these are supposed to be the good guys, folks. He then steps outside, only to be confronted by a confident Plankton. Mr. Krabs tries to scare him, but Plankton shrugs it off and calls him by his name. Krabs tries to pull the wool over his eyes one last time by imitating Pearl's voice, but Plankton doesn't fall for it, instead revealing that he knows what Krabs' biggest fear is. Mr. Krabs asks him what he's talking about, which leads to Plankton pulling out a remote, pressing the only button built into it, and trapping him in the same claw device that we saw earlier in the episode.
How he could possibly build and install that device in such a short period of time is anyone's guess. But the episode's almost over, and I don't want to extend this review any longer by going over every little nitpick.
With Mr. Krabs once again at his mercy, Plankton directs his attention to a mime. The mime walks up to Mr. Krabs and begins miming to him. Mr. Krabs shrieks in terror and begs Plankton to call off the mime, but a satisfied Plankton just laughs at him and asks how fun it is to be the one tortured with their deepest fear. It's here where I have to bring up yet another problem I have with this episode. Why are mimes Krabs' biggest fear? He's a greedy cheapskate, so you'd think his biggest fear would be having his money defiled in some way. Why wouldn't Plankton just burn all of Krabs' money right in front of him? Or have SpongeBob cook their customers free Krabby Patties or something? That would have been a fitting punishment, since attempting to steal the Krabby Patty formula was what landed Plankton in this mess to begin with, and it would have actually played off of characteristics about Mr. Krabs that this show already established. But no, we got the mime instead because LOL, that's so random, right?
Believe it or not, that isn't even the worst part of the episode. No, the worst part comes right afterwards. Wanna see what that is? Roll it, editors!
Hey, Plankton, if I were you, I wouldn't be so smug.
Why not?
Because a hungry pot of whales just showed up for its early feeding.
Not another feeding! Get me out of here! Get me out! Get me out! Well, you redeemed yourself, boy. Okay, you really are creeping me out now.
Hey, so, remember what SpongeBob said only 2 or 3 minutes ago?
Mr. Krabs, I know you and Plankton are sworn enemies and all, but putting on a dress to frighten him? Isn't that taking it a little too far?
Well, that little yellow bastard can take those words and shove them right up his pooper.
First off, what made him have such a drastic change of heart within the span of a couple minutes? I thought he was against Mr. Krabs driving Plankton to suicide by exploiting his deepest fear, and yet he turns right around and does the exact same thing to him at the end of the episode? What the hell? This sequence of events comes right the fuck out of nowhere. It's like the writers went, oh crap, the good guys still need to win in the end, and we've arbitrarily decided that SpongeBob and Mr. Krabs are the good guys in the episode, despite acting like absolute sociopathic monsters throughout it. So let's just throw in some half-assed way for them to beat Plankton, even if it doesn't make much sense. Secondly, how did Plankton not see the projector on the table? I mean, he was inside the restaurant for a good while, and yet he didn't question why a projector had been set up for seemingly no reason at one of the tables? Even if you argue that the sight of whales would have scared Plankton enough to get him to stop paying attention to his surroundings, projectors still make noise when they're being used, and I don't think Plankton would have been able to ignore that. Last but not least, what fucking point is this episode trying to make? That it's okay for you to drive people to suicide by stalking and torturing them if they so much as inconvenience you, so long as you aren't a total sociopath about it? I'm sorry, but that is a horrible lesson. Is this ending supposed to be funny? Because I genuinely don't see what the joke is here. And I don't mean that I don't find the joke funny, I mean that I literally don't know what the joke is.
The writers were so close. All they had to do was let Plankton win, or at least have him lose to somebody other than SpongeBob, and this episode wouldn't have been as bad. Oh, it still would have been bad, just not as bad. But that's enough rambling. It's time to close out this review by telling you guys what I think about this episode.
The principal issue with One Course Meal is that its writers didn't think through the implications of their story. When they had Pearl casually say that she prefers eating salad to Plankton, they not only go against the continuity that has been established in several prior episodes where characters were scared of being eaten by other sentient creatures, but they also completely derail her character, as well as everyone else's characters, by making her and the rest of Bikini Bottom uncaring cannibals. Why are they okay with eating sentient sea creatures like Plankton? Who would sign off on something like that? And I swear, if someone brings up that scene from Fry Cook Games where a couple of spectators got turned into fish sticks and then sold as food in order to disprove my point, I'm going to politely set them aside and explain to them that that scene was a joke, whereas the events of this episode are played completely straight. However, even if the cruel undertones of this episode's story don't bother you, you've still gotta contend with the fact that this plot doesn't even make any sense. Why does Plankton need to ask Krabs where he's hidden the secret formula if he should already know where it is? Why doesn't Plankton just buck up and think of ways to stop Pearl instead of devolving into a paranoid insomniac? Why didn't he ever notice that the whale stalking him was just Mr. Krabs in a suit? Why did the quality of Mr. Krabs' Pearl suit inexplicably change in quality from scene to scene? Why do the writers expect me to believe that this is the first time that Mr. Krabs has ever tried to exploit Plankton's fear of whales and vice versa? Why are mimes Mr. Krabs' biggest fear? Why does Karen act like such an uncaring bitch? Why does SpongeBob go from helping Plankton to stabbing him in the back? The fact that I need to ask all of these questions proves to me that the writers of One Course Meal weren't really thinking about the story they were telling. Because if they had been thinking, then all of these questions would have been addressed in the episode itself.
With all of that said, do I think that One Course Meal is as bad of an episode as everyone says it is? Yes, 1,000 times yes! I'm Alex the Critic, and I'll see you guys next time.